Her name was Eleanor of Rouen, 26 years old, a quiet midwife, and newly a mother herself. But on a gray winter dawn in 1314, she was dragged into a stone chamber where the walls sweated with cold, and the air carried one thing she would never forget: the smell of scorched iron, thick and metallic, clinging to the back of her throat. It was the smell that meant your life was already over. They said she had sinned. They said she had betrayed her vows. They said her child was fathered in secret. But the truth was simpler. Eleanor had defied a man with power, and in medieval Europe, that was enough to be condemned. This video will show you 3 things the chronicles refuse to say out loud. First, how a device shaped like a claw, glowing red like a furnace ember, became the weapon designed only for women and only for mothers. Second, how the church and the courts used it not for justice, but to erase a woman's identity, her body, and her voice. And third, the silent truth behind what happened to Eleanor and thousands like her after the chamber door slammed shut. Because the iron spider, as women whispered in terror, was not built to kill quickly. It was built to unmake a woman piece by piece. In that chamber, Eleanor's breath trembled as she heard the iron hiss in the fire. The smell shifted, scorched metal turning into something sharper, almost sweet, almost sickening. A smell that told her the claw was now hot enough to take flesh with it when it pulled away. Every woman feared it. Every village knew its name. And every record tried to erase the fact that this device existed for one purpose: to destroy the part of her body that proved she could give life. And Eleanor, standing barefoot, wrists bound, realized the darkest truth of all. They weren't punishing her crime. They were punishing her existence. The chamber was small, circular, and built to hold sound. Every whisper bounced back like a confession, and every breath carried that same suffocating scent of scorched iron, settling heavy in Eleanor's lungs. It was the church's perfect design, because fear spreads fastest in tight spaces. The device waiting for her on the wooden table looked almost delicate at first glance. 4 curved iron claws, jointed like a mechanical hand. But when the executioner lifted it with a leather-wrapped grip, the illusion shattered. This was no tool. This was a verdict. The breast ripper, the iron spider, the punishment created specifically for women the authorities labeled as corrupting the moral order. It was not used on men. Not once, not anywhere. The mechanism was cruelly simple. Heat the claws until they glowed red. Clamp them onto the victim's breast, lock the hinge, and pull. Not a clean cut, not a swift burn, a ripping, slow enough to shred skin, muscle, and identity in the same motion. The goal wasn't death. The goal was erasure. But here is the truth the church scribes never admitted. This device existed because medieval societies believed the female body symbolized loyalty, purity, and submission. By destroying her breast, they destroyed the symbol of motherhood, sexuality, and independence. They made an example of her, not through execution, but through permanent disfigurement. And this is the part the chronicles whisper only between the lines. Women like Eleanor weren't tortured for adultery. They were tortured for autonomy. When the executioner pulled the glowing device from the fire, the claws radiated an orange, dripping sparks onto the floor. The smell thickened. Scorched iron, burning air, anticipation of pain. Eleanor didn't scream yet. She only stared at the weapon designed to rewrite her body forever. History remembers kings, priests, and battles. But these rooms, these devices, these women, they vanish unless someone digs them back out. If you want these buried truths revealed without mercy, this is the moment to subscribe so you never miss the next investigation into the cruelties history try to hide. Because what happens next, what they did to Eleanor, was never supposed to survive the records. When the iron spider finally touched air outside the fire, the claws glowed so brightly they lit the entire chamber in a pulsing red. And with every flicker of light came that same choking scent, scorched iron, now mixing with sweat, dust, and dread. Eleanor's knees weakened, not from pain yet, but from the knowledge that this device had only one purpose: to take something from her she could never get back. The attendant priest stood behind the executioner, their robes shadowed, their faces unreadable. They called this punishment moral purification. But the truth was written in their silence. This wasn't purification, it was performance, a spectacle of authority meant to warn every woman in the village what happened when she stepped outside the lines drawn for her. The claw opened with a metallic click, not loud, but sharp enough to freeze her breath. They clamped it out to her chest. The first shock wasn't pain, it was the sound, a faint, sizzling whisper as hot metal met skin. She smelled it before she felt it, scorched iron mixing with something new, something horrifyingly human. Then came the pull, a violent backward jerk that wrenched her entire torso off balance. The claws didn't cut, they tore, a ripping meant to unthread her flesh from the inside out. The walls caught her cry and threw it back at her, echoing like a chorus of women who had stood in this room before her and those who would be dragged here after. But here is the part history tries to bury. The iron spider wasn't just used on guilty women. It was used on women whose pregnancies were inconvenient, on widows who refused remarriage, on midwives who spoke too boldly, on girls who accused noblemen of harm. The unexpected truth, the one chroniclers disguised with flowery words, is that this device became a political weapon, a way to erase testimony, to silence rebellion, to punish bodies that embarrassed powerful men. And the shock that finally shattered the chamber that day wasn't the device, it was Eleanor herself. Because when the executioner reset the hinge for a second pull, she did something no one in that room expected. She turned her face toward the priest who ordered her punishment, and she spoke. Only 4 words, but they changed the entire fate of the chamber. Your sin is worse. The chamber froze. Even the executioner hesitated, the iron spider hanging in his grip like a suspended heartbeat. And in that silence, the smell of scorched iron thickened again, heat still radiating from the metal, drifting through the room like a warning neither side could ignore. Those 4 words, your sin is worse, did something no device, no decree, no priest had ever managed. They shifted the room. For the first time, the men standing above her felt something dangerously close to exposure. Because Eleanor had not only accused them, she had revealed the truth they feared most, that cruelty is never righteous, only convenient. What happened in that chamber next never made it into official records. The priest claimed she fainted. The court claimed she confessed. The scribes claim she died quietly. But women in Rouen told another story, one passed through generations in whispers, always accompanied by the smell of burnt metal. They said Eleanor survived long enough to speak again, long enough to name the man who forced himself on her, long enough to make the villagers question the purity of the court that condemned her. And that is the echo we still hear today. Because the iron spider didn't disappear when the Middle Ages ended. Its logic survived in every system that judges women more harshly than men, in every courtroom where a victim is blamed for her own suffering, in every place where a woman's body becomes an example rather than a human being. Modern societies no longer heat iron claws and fire, but the impulse to punish female autonomy remains, quieter, cleaner, wrapped in paperwork instead of flames. So here's the question the story leaves behind. When a society crafts a punishment specifically for women, what does it fear more? Their mistakes or their independence? If you want these buried narratives unmasked, truths the chroniclers buried, the courts sanitized, and the historians softened, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the next descent into the shadows of human history. Because somewhere, even now, the old iron still cools, and its story is not finished.